guys, welcome to our March cookie class. It's my lucky day. You should all have your little kit out of the freezer for at least 15 minutes, and I'm just going to give you a little rundown of everything that is inside. We have, first off, our icing. You can actually take all of this icing out of the bag and set it in front of you. Our cookies. Before we get to our cookies, we're going to actually practice on a practice sheet. We got this little packet here, as well as these little sprinkles and edible flowers. What you're going to find in this little packet here is going to be our practice sheet. I'm going to get that out and set that in front of me. So this right here. We also have some extra bags. Let's turn that phone on silent. Some extra piping bags, just in case you need to rebag your icing in case you cut your hole too big. So there's a few extra bags in there. I'm just gonna set that aside. We have the picture of our set. I like to put this in front of me as well so that I can take a look at it as I'm working on my cookies. There is a little cutout of a shamrock. Keep that close by, don't lose that. Scribe tool here. And lastly, a marker and a paintbrush that we will be using during class. So go ahead and get all that ready, get your icing out, and then come on back. So a couple things that you want to have handy with you are a pair of scissors. Make sure it's a nice sharp pair of scissors, as well as a paper towel. Now I like to get my paper towel wet because royal icing tends to get kind of crusty, so this will just help keep your area nice and clean. I'm going to go ahead and show you this practice sheet, and then I'll show you step by step how to outline your cookies, how to fill them in. So if you want your cookies to look like this picture here, I highly recommend that you watch all the steps that I do on the screen. But what you're going to do is you're going to start off by giving your bags all a good massage. You want to make sure this is all mixed really well. And also, if you notice, there's this extra plastic here. I actually like to cut that off. So if you decide to do that, don't cut right up against this black tape. You want to leave about 2 inches from the tape so that icing doesn't come up the top here easier. So go ahead and give your bags a massage while you are watching me practice this, or show you how to practice here. Yeah. So this is probably the most important part of the class, and that's how you cut your piping bag. We are going to practice with our yellow icing, so I want you to get that out. I'm going to make sure, or you want to make sure that you're watching me do this, especially if you haven't done this before. However, if you've taken this class several times, you don't need to even do the practice sheet. However, there is writing here at the bottom that you'll want to probably practice on. So what's really important when you're cutting your bag is that you're holding that seam facing up and that it's centered. Okay, and I like to flatten my tip. Now when I cut my bag, I always try to cut smaller than I think I need because I can always cut more, but I can't take it back. So if I cut super tiny straight across, my goal is to get this yellow icing as thick as this black line. Now if you do end up cutting your hole too big, there are extra bags. All you'll do is just squeeze this icing. I would cut a big hole out of this, squeeze it into the new bag, and you can start over. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let the air out of my bag. My goal again is to just get this yellow icing as thick as this black line. The way that I hold my bag is I pinch that tape where I pinch with my thumb and my pointer finger at that tape, because even though that tape is there, it's not going to prevent the icing from going up the top. So you always want to keep that closed, and then I twist the bag so the pod is nice and tight, and I rest my pod in my hand. I'm going to squeeze with these 3 fingers again while keeping this tape closed. I like to hold my wrist steady, and then I start by touching my tip on the paper. I touch my tip and then I squeeze my bag, and as soon as the icing hits the paper, I'm lifting my tip about 1 inch high, just letting the icing fall. I'm not dragging my tip. I'm lifted here, and before I get to the end, I want to release the pressure and lay that line down. You basically don't want to see any black underneath this line, that means your hole is probably too small and you're gonna have issues with it curling. So mine's a little small. I'm gonna cut just a bit bigger. The seam is facing up like before. I flatten the tip again. It's really important to do that. And then I'm gonna cut a smidge more. If your line's breaking, that means you're not squeezing hard enough. If your line is squiggly, either your hole is too small or you're squeezing too hard. You don't want to be dragging, you want to lift. Because you're lifting, you're going to release the pressure, lay the line down. So real quick, I'm just going to show you up close so that you can see how high that I hold my tip. So I start by touching my tip on the paper, I squeeze, let's see, can you see that? And then I lift, just letting the icing fall on the line. And then I release the pressure, lay the line down. One thing I forgot to mention is you want to keep your tip clean. We don't want any crusties on there. So I'm often just giving it a little bit of swipe. So work on the lines, pause this, and then I'm going to show you the rest of the practice sheet. Once you're done with the lines, you're going to go ahead and work on these squiggles. Same thing like before, my tip touches, I squeeze, and I lift. But this time I'm looking a little bit ahead of where I want the icing to fall. And I'm just going a little bit slower, which means I'm kind of squeezing just a touch less. When I'm ready to stop, I release the pressure, lay that down, give my tip a little swipe. Same thing here, tip touches. I am holding my bag at a slant. I lift up. Whoop. It looks like I had a little air pocket in my bag, and that's okay. I'm just going to start here, lifting up, looking a little bit ahead of where I want that icing to fall. That never happens to me. And then release the pressure, lay that down. And then with the circles, I'm going to do almost the same thing. I'm just going to go even slower here. So my tip touches just like before, lift up, looking at the black line, squeezing just a little bit less, but also just enough for that line to not break. If you're squeezing too hard, you're not going to be able to control this line, so you just want to squeeze softly, lifting, breathing. When I get to the end, release the pressure, tip is down. With the heart, what I'm showing you here is every edge or point or corner, you want to put your tip down. I'll show you what I mean. So I have a starting point, I lift up, but when I get to this point here, you're going to put your tip back down, just like this. Okay, and then you'll start where you left off and lift up again. And the reason I do this is I want nice sharp edges on my cookie, so anywhere there's a corner or a point, that's what you're going to do. And I also can regain control of the icing. When you are done with that, you're going to practice your writing here. I want you to practice two different ways. The first way is going to be tracing this, but you're going to touch and lift, touch and lift. And you'll do that here, touch and lift and touch. The other way I want you to try is to almost drag your tip on the paper. So I'm squeezing gently and very close to the paper the whole time. And I want you to see what is the most comfortable way for you to write on here, because that's what you're going to end up doing on your cookie. So this one I'm dragging. To me, I like to lift, but that's why I want you guys to go ahead and practice that. When you're done, just fold that in half and go ahead and get your cookies out of their bags. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to outline and flood your first cookie. We're going to start with the flag cookie. I'm just going to show you on one of my cookies, but when you guys go to do yours, you're going to outline both, and then you're going to fill both in after that. So I will show you on this one cookie, but you guys will do both. The pink icing, why don't you go ahead and start massaging it? It is a thinner consistency than what you practiced with, so it's going to come out faster, so you might want to cut your hole just a little bit smaller. Remember to face that seam up toward the ceiling, flatten the tip, and cut small to start. And squeeze the air out onto your paper towel. Now, I might have cut too big. We'll find out. So pinch that tape, twist the bag, and I'm going to outline my cookies. And I like to outline my cookies because it helps prevent the icing from spilling over the edge. So I start by touching my tip on there, squeeze and lift. And I'm going to go as close to the edge of the cookie as I can go. And I'm actually happy with this size of outline. You don't want this one to be too thin because it is such loose icing, so tip touches here. And this little bit of a thick wall here will really help prevent that icing from spilling over. Lifting, tip down. And then I'm lifting here and tip down, lifting, straight down, and then I just messed up. Oh no! I mess up every class, guys, so don't be surprised. But if you mess up, you're going to take your little wooden scribe and you can just wipe off whatever you're not happy with. You don't need to erase the whole cookie, but it's very important to clean off that scribe tool. You don't want crusties on there. And then you just go back to where you were at, tip down and up. So if there's one thing you guys can remember during this class is to let your outlines dry. So pretend I waited about 3 minutes for this to dry. So you'll outline your first 2 cookies and then you're gonna cut your hole bigger as soon as this icing dries, and you're gonna start filling it in. So it only takes about 3 minutes or so, but if you have a fan or something to wave over your cookie, that will speed the process up. But I'm gonna cut my hole bigger because if I try to fill this cookie in with this little hole, it would take too long and my icing might start to crust. So I'm gonna cut my hole just a little bit more. I still wanna have control of this icing, so I don't want it to be too big, but I'm gonna squeeze the icing down, twist the bag. I'm especially gonna hold that tape closed, and instead of lifting like we were doing when we were practicing, I'm just going to almost touch my tip to the cookie. I'm just right above the cookie so that I can control where that goes. If I was lifting here, I would not be able to push the icing where I want it to go. So I'm squeezing here, and you do have to move pretty quickly because royal icing does crust fast, but I'm just going around the edge. I'm gonna fill this in. And if you notice here, I'm not gonna leave any holes. I want this nice and full and puffy. We're just gonna move pretty quick down the cookie. And you wanna remember to outline both first before you do this part because you want that small hole to outline your cookies. You wanna fill this in with a bigger hole, otherwise that would take too long. To smooth it out, what you're gonna do is you can, well, first off, if you need to spread any icing around, you're gonna hold your scribe like a pencil and kind of push it around. But if you're having to do that a lot with your scribe tool, that usually means you didn't add enough icing. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna gently stab the cookie with my scribe and give it a little bit of a shake, and it should smooth over as long as I've added enough. And I'm kind of jiggling the surface, slowly moving my scribe up until it's nice and smooth. Before I move on to my next flood, I want to make sure icing isn't spilling over. It's a quick fix, but you have to catch it right away. So if you notice icing spilling over, you're just going to take your scribe tool and swipe around the edge of the cookie. And you're going to keep swiping until it stops spilling over. I had a little bit coming off. So if you go on to your next cookie and you don't realize that it's spilling over and you go to do that, what's going to happen? It's going to crack your surface. So you want to make sure you do that right away before moving on to your next. So go ahead and flood both of your flag cookies and meet me back here. One thing that is helpful for your cookie set is a table fan. So if you have a table fan available, it's great to take that out and fan your cookies while you're working on other cookies. So I have my flag cookies right now. They are underneath a fan, just a regular table fan. Go ahead and start massaging your dark green icing as well as your orange icing while I show you this next step. I'm going to show you how to outline and start filling in your gnome as well as starting to your shamrock as well. So this is our mint brownie cookie and it is so good. So every month I do have a featured flavor for you guys to try. And this one is delicious. So I'm going to show you again just on one cookie, then you guys will go do yours. So the first thing you're going to do as soon as you're done with the flag is start your gnome. So the seam is centered, I flatten the tip, small hole. This is the same consistency as that pink. So you want to cut small. If you look right here, there's a little indent. That is where the bottom of the brim of the hat is. So I like to start with the brim of the hat. So I start right here at this indent. I touch and I lift and I'm going straight across the bottom and my tip touches the other end. Then I'm going to lift here, going as close to the edge as I can go, curve, and then I like to do a slight dip to the other side and curve again, using that shape of the cookie to help me. Then I will outline the top of the hat. So again, you'll start with the brim, then you're going to outline the top and the bottom of the cookie. So this, as well as the orange, flatten the tip, small hole, and the beard. So I'm using my orange icing and my tip connects right here. I lift and I'm not going to put my tip down at all. I'm just kind of waving back and forth the shape of the cookie and just kind of doing a wave all the way up, and then my tip touches. So you'll outline both, and then once both are outlined, you're going to come over to your shamrock and you're going to do a couple things with this. So I have my little shamrock cut out. We're just allowing this outline to dry, so while we're waiting for it to dry, we can take our little shamrock template and marker, and I'm going to outline this cookie, this shamrock here. So I want to hold that very tightly closed. Now if your cookie's frozen like mine is, it might not mark very well, so I may need to wait a little longer. We'll find out, because mine is not marking. So your cookie can't be cold, otherwise this marker will not work. Let's try this one. A little better. Yeah. Make sure your cookies are defrosted. Okay. So that is outlined. You are ideally going to want it a little bit darker because you're going to want to see this outline. So I'm just going to try to get everything that it missed. Okay. Once you're done with that, you're going to take your paintbrush. And what's cool about this cookie is if you want both of your shamrocks to be opposite colors, you're going to do the opposite color here. So on the photo, it's light green underneath and dark green all around, but you can do one light green underneath and one dark green underneath if you want two different colored cookies. So I'm going to just cut a small hole in my light green and I'm going to paint this on. So me tracing that shamrock will help it'll help me outline my shamrock cookie easier. So I'm going to take this paintbrush now and I'm going to paint a very thin layer of icing. Now this is okay to go outside the lines. All you want to do is make sure that you can still see that shamrock that you traced, but you don't want to see cookie. So I'm making sure that it's thick enough to where I see the green underneath, but thin enough to where I see my shamrock shape that I have traced. So I'm just brushing and brushing, going outside the lines. It's better to brush outside the lines and try to stay inside here, because all the stuff outside is going to be covered. So I want to show you how thin this is. So right here, it's very thin. You don't want it bumpy. You just want a smooth layer right here. I can still see my shamrock outline. So once you're done with outlining your gnome, you're going to trace your shamrock. Then you're going to go back to your gnome and you're only going to fill in this part of the cap. Now you want to make sure that you don't cut your green hole bigger. You shouldn't need to, because this is such a small area to fill in, but make sure you're adding enough in here. You want this nice and puffy. I like to smooth this section out with the tip of my bag because it's such a small section, it's pretty easy to do. So what I do is I fill it in. I'm going to come back with my tip and I'm gently squeezing and kind of jiggling very aggressively back and forth, slowly moving my tip up to the surface, and it should smooth that out. So you're going to put this one in front of a fan as soon as you're done flooding both of those. While those are crusting, they are under a fan, I'm going to outline and start filling in my rainbow. So I'm going to start by touching my tip here. I'm using the dark green, and I'm lifting, going as close to the edge of the cookie as I can go. And people in class actually used other colors, like a different order in this. It all looks cute, so feel free to be creative here. I'm going to do it how it is in the photo. So I go all the way around. I'm going to go about a ½ inch or so, and I'm looking at the line above here. That is how I'm able to evenly space these out. You're welcome to use that marker, but by looking at the line, it's helping guide me how thick I want this rainbow line to be. And it's all evenly spaced around there. Once that's done, I want to make sure I close the bottom. And then I will work on my next color, which is going to be the light green. Make sure it's well massaged. I'm going to come to the bottom and go about a ½ inch. And then looking at the line above, all the way around as I go around, mindfully, evenly spacing that out. Tip touches, and now I close. And then the orange, going across and lifting and around, tip touches and close. Once that is dry, so actually while you are letting this dry, you can fill in your, no, scratch that. You're gonna let this crust. By the time you're done with your second one, it should be crusted enough to start to fill in. So I'm gonna go ahead and just fill in the green part. And I forgot to mention that a lot of times I don't flood two colors next to each other right away. I always let the first colors crust. That's why we didn't fill in the beard yet or the top of the gnome hat, because I want this to keep its shape. I want the curves to stay, just like I want the curves of his hat to stay. I don't want it to lose its shape. And so allowing these sections to crust really does help with that. So once this outline has crusted, I did not cut my green hole bigger here. I am just making sure that I'm holding that tape closed really tight. So I don't want icing coming out the top. So you're only going to fill in the top green as well as the orange. Nothing's touching each other. Stay apart. So jiggling and squeezing gently until it smooths over, and then here comes the orange. And I will fill that in. I'm going to put this in front of a fan and grab my gnome and my flag. So meet me back here as soon as you're done outlining and flooding both rainbows, just the dark green and the orange. Another thing that helps with the fan is sometimes when there's like really narrow areas, like these curves right here, they're pretty narrow and sometimes they tend to crater, and if you put them in front of a fan, they will crust quicker, which is nice. So, and they won't crater in. So go ahead and work on that and meet me back. Once you're done with the rainbow, you're going to come over to your flag. If it's not looking dry enough, just hold off, but I'm going to go ahead and outline my flag pole. So I start here at the bottom and I go straight up all the way up to this point here. There's a little point at the top. That's where you want that to be. You don't want this to be too far to the right. And then just a teeny tiny little straight line across, and now I'm going down. The same thing with the rainbow. I'm looking at the line next to it, trying my best to evenly space it out. You want to make sure that you leave room here for your little tassels. Then I'm going to take my dark green and I'm not going to touch the light green with my tip. I'm leaving the smallest little space all the way down to that corner here and then lifting to this point and here. So if you see, there's a little tiny bit of space right between the two greens. Once you're done with that, you're going to come over to your gnome and you are going to fill in the beard. You can actually cut your hole bigger here if you need to, which I am going to do so that I can flood it quicker. So I'm just going to go right up against that line. If you don't have a table fan, maybe like a piece of paper to fan your cookies would also be helpful. Anything to kind of speed up the process of crusting would be great. I'm just filling this in. And once that's filled in, I'm going to outline my shamrock cookie, and I'll show you how to do that. So just jiggling, stab and jiggle. Nice and puffy. Don't forget to check for spillage. Once that's done, you can come over to your shamrock and you're just going to outline your shamrock. Did you see I put my finger right here? That's lovely. And again. So I'm going to go ahead and outline my shamrock. Now if you painted this light green, you're going to outline it with dark green, but if you painted it dark green, you're going to outline with the light green. So when I'm outlining this, I'm making sure to keep that marker on the outside of the shamrock if it is showing, because anything inside of this is going to show. So I want to make sure any marker is left outside. Once you're done with this, you can fill in your flag. And that's going to allow that to crust so that we can write our letters, our word on there. So that's outlined, and now I'm going to make sure to outline the circle all the way around. Come over to your flag and you can start filling that in, which I'm going to show you right now, and then you can go back to your cookies. So as long as the pole is not touching the flag, you can actually fill both of these in. If they are touching, fill the flag first, and then about 3 minutes later you can fill the pole. So pretty easy to fill this in. You know, the cookie that people were saying was the most difficult one in this set is the shamrock, surprisingly. I did not think that would be very hard. Alright, so go ahead and go back to where you were at. What's great about these online classes is you can pause, rewind all of that, fast forward, so that you can really go at your own pace here. And if you're at home, definitely take longer in between steps to let these crust. We only have 2 hours in class in person, so it's nice to do it at home and have more time to allow things to dry. So go ahead and work on that. Once the flag is filled in and the gnome beard is filled in, you can come back to your rainbow and you're going to fill in the light green color. There really is so much you can do with this set. I only do like the basic stuff, but if you ever want to do more, like one other thing you can do with this rainbow is at the end you can outline it all in yellow. That would look cute, all the sections in yellow. Add gold at the bottom. There we go, and you'll just fill that in. What's next is the hat of our gnome, which is one of my favorite parts of the class. We're doing something called the wet on wet technique, and what that means is I'm going to drop my base color, which is going to be light green. I'm going to add some lines in there and drag my scribe tool to create this marbling look, and it'll all be flat because you want to do it while the icing is all wet. So you want to make sure you do one cookie at a time, okay? You don't want to flood both hats green and then come back with the lines. Also test your lines to make sure the hole is the right size. If you're too thick, what's going to happen is your lines are going to be too thick, so you can rebag. But when I'm filling this in, look how I'm leaving a few holes because we're adding more color to this, so I don't want this to be puffy. I still want this, let me use my other scribe. I still want this to be smooth. So there, it's nice and smooth. I'm kind of just jiggling the surface, but it's not quite as puffy as all the other cookies because I don't want it to spill over. So I'm going to take my dark green, making sure my tip is clean. I touch my tip to the cookie and then I lift up going straight across, release the pressure, my tip goes down. I like to do two right next to each other, and then I'll do a space and then two more. So touch and lift, and you do have to move quickly. And also just a reminder, one cookie at a time, otherwise it's going to crust and you won't have time for it'll start to crust as you're trying to put your scribe through it. So now I'm adding pink in any of the light spaces. You're welcome to use orange, you can use yellow. And now I'm going to take my scribe tool and making sure it's clean, I'm going to go right down the center and drag just beneath the surface of the icing. I'm dragging down the center, not digging my scribe tool in there. I'm going to wipe it off, but I am dragging down underneath the surface. Now I'm going to go to the side and slight curve following the shape of the hat to the side and wipe my scribe. I'm not dragging this on my cookie. I am just under the surface of that icing. Now between each one, I'm going to go up. So I'm going to lift up, and I like to slightly curve it at the top, kind of with the shape of the hat. So up and curve. And you see I don't have any icing spilling over because I didn't fill it quite as full as the others. So go ahead and work on that. So this outline has crusted for me. I'm actually going to cut my green hole bigger at this point. You don't want to cut it bigger until your flag is outlined, until your wet on wet is done. But now I'm going to go ahead and fill in this cookie while everything's drying. Everything else should be flooded at this point. We're allowing it to crust so that we can work on all of our details. So did cut my hole bigger, and I'm going around the cookie quickly. And there is something different, a little bit different about this flood than previously. I'm going to show you that as soon as I get this cookie filled. So if you painted your shamrock dark green, you're going to use the light green to flood this. Filling this in. Definitely you're going to want to check for spillage here. So once that's full, I want to clean it up a bit, and by cleaning it up, I'm going to take my scribe and kind of gently jiggle the surface and kind of bring it to a point here and kind of cover my outline as best as I can. So at all these little indents, I'm kind of dragging my tip up that, just like that. And that's your first completed cookie. However, if you want, you can add some sprinkles on here. I would wait about 2 minutes, and then you can take your sprinkles. This is optional. It's not in the photo, but I thought it looked really cute. Some people did this in class. And I'm just going to add some sprinkles on that cookie. You just don't want to add it immediately right away like I did, because you're going to notice that these are going to kind of sink in a little bit. So wait like a minute or two, and then you can add your sprinkles. So that's your first finished cookie. And now I'm going to show you how to finish all of your details. You want to make sure all of your cookies have crusted before doing any of these next steps. I'm going to show you how to finish our gnome cookie. So we're going to start with, there's a little tiny heart on his hat. What I'm going to do is I'm going to touch my tip to the cookie and I squeeze, making a dot. And now I'm slowly dragging my tip toward the cookie, slowly releasing the pressure. So I squeeze, slowly releasing the pressure and getting closer and closer to the cookie. And there's my little heart. Practice those on your parchment or on your paper towel before you get to your cookie. And now we're going to do the hardest part of the whole class. You guys ready for it? It's going to be his little nose. So I touch just like we did with the yellow. Squeeze, 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 squeeze. Release the pressure, then lift. Now this is going to spread a little bit because the weather is so cold and it's such a loose icing. You want to make sure everything is crusted before you do any of these details that I'm showing you right now. Once you're done with the gnome, he's so cute, you're going to go to your flag. And as long as this is crusted, you can go ahead and write your words on it. I would practice a bunch before you do this. So practice on a paper towel, but I like to lift my tip. Touch and lift. And if your hole is too big, so a great reason to practice is you can tell if your hole is going to be too big if you need to rebag your icing. Lucky. And you can write anything you want on here. You're also going to do 2 lines right here connecting the flag to the pole. I'm going to do 2 right here. I know it's not in the picture, but I like how that looks. And I'm going to get my sprinkles ready. I'm going to do my little curved little tassel here. So I'm going to show you that. So I like to start with the outer one that's closest to the edge of the cookie. And right away, once I'm done with these 3 lines, if you can fit 3 or you can do 2, but you're going to add the sprinkles immediately because this will crust quick because it is such a thin line. And I think I want to bring this line down a little bit more. And take my sprinkles and drizzle those on the tassel. I find that they stick better if your yellow hole is a bit thicker. So if you want, write your lettering and then you can cut your hole a touch more and then add the sprinkles on that. That is your 3rd finished cookie. Now our final cookie is going to be our rainbow. I have these edible flowers. They're made from rice paper. I cut all of these out for you guys. Now if your light green is still very wet, you want to make sure that you don't put any of these flowers on that. So I'm going to show you how to do it without touching your light green. But what I'm going to do is there's a side that's a little bumpy looking and one that's flat. The flat side is facing up and I'm slightly curving these petals up. Okay, I'm curving those up. I'm going to take my yellow, make a little dot right here, and when I place this on the cookie, I'm making sure that the petal is not going to touch that light green. So it's lifted so it's not laying flat on there. It does look like it's touching it on the screen, however, because it's lifted, it is not touching it. I'll show you. See. And then I'm going to do 2 more. So I'm going to move this one to the orange layer. And again, I don't want that touching. And then I'll do 1 more right here. And curve these. I think these flowers are yummy. I gave you an extra. You could taste it. But you can also taste it when you eat your cookie. And then I'm going to touch my tip and squeeze, 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 making a little dot in the middle of each flower, whatever size you want. I just leave my tip close to that flower as I squeeze. I leave my tip in place and then squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until I'm happy with the size. And there we go. We have finished our cookies. I hope you love them. I thank you so much for signing up for class. I really appreciate you supporting my small business, and I'm just so grateful that you took my class. So if you have any questions, just let me know. But happy St. Patty's Day. I hope you guys have a great time. Bye.